Hello. In this video, we are going to explore the type function. And what the type function does in Python is it allows us to determine what the type is of the variable we're looking at. This is useful in a number of different ways. And to kind of build this program, we're going to take a flowchart, which I have here on the right-hand side of the screen, pardon me, and we're going to implement this step by step. And we're going to look at what an if structure is. All right, so let's see. So we have a start program up here, and the first thing we do is we declare a variable called value, and we set it equal to something. So I'm going to say value equals, and I'm going to put just 416 for now. Now, as we run this program, we're going to change this value and look at how it changes the behavior of the program. But this could be a bunch of things. You might take an input. You might read something from a file. Value is essentially a value that is somehow generated. So the next thing in the flowchart we can see is that we say value type equals type value. And type is a function which will return the type of a value that is passed. So if I come here and I say value type equals type, and then I'm going to say value, what this does is type is a function and it takes as a parameter some variable, and then it will return the type that that variable is. And I'm just going to show you here really quickly by printing value type. I'm going to show you some things. All right, so now we come in here and I'm going to say, oh, there we go. We're going to say Python 3 space, and we're going to say checking type. And here it says, it kind of shows up in an interesting way. It says class int. And this is getting a little bit more advanced, but let's just take, what do we want to take from this? It's saying that value is a type integer. Likewise, I could do something. If I made this 416 like this, and I ran this again, now it sees that it's a string. If I say 416.0, now we see it's a float. And again, if I made this something like true, now we see it's a bool, which is short for Boolean. So what this type function does is it allows us to look at the type that we're working with and then understand it. And it turns out you can put this inside of an if statement. So what we have here is we have an if statement where we're chained together what are called Elsif statements, where we are going to check each type. So the way it works is we're going to check, is the value type, if it's an integer, if that's yes, we're going to print out it's an integer. Else if the value type is a float, we're going to print out it's a float. Else if the value type is a Boolean, if it's yes, we'll print out it's a Boolean. And if it's none of these, we know that it must be a string, and so therefore we're going to print out it's a string. So this is our else statement. So the way we set this up is we set it up like this, is we say if, and we're going to say if value type is equivalent to, and when programming, two equal signs show equivalent, and we're going to say if value type is equivalent to an int, we put a colon. And what we do now is we say if the value type is equivalent to an int, then we're going to print out to the screen, it is an integer. And let's just go to the bottom here. I'm just going to print end program so you can see where the program ends. And then we're going to come back into here. We're going to run this again. And notice how it just says end program. That's because the value is currently a Boolean. So if I set this to 416 and then I come over here and run it, I get it is an integer, because now when I check the type, the type is an integer, and therefore we print that out. So this one is, if it's not an integer, we're going to check if it's a float. So we're going to come in here and say elif. This is how we write what's called an else if structure, meaning that if this if is not true, we're going to check this next. And we're going to say value type is equivalent to, and we say float. And if this is true, we're going to say it is a float. And we're going to say elif, and we're going to say value type is equivalent to bool, and we're going to print it is a Boolean. And at the very end, we're going to put an else, because if it's not an integer, and it's not a float, and it's not a Boolean, then it must be a string. We print it is a string. And now when I save this, I keep saying save it, but I'm using this new REPL interface so I don't have to. I run it, I get it is an integer. But if I come up here and change this to 416 as a string, it is a string. If I make it 56.34, it is a float. So what we've done here is we've explored this function type, which will tell me the type of a variable, and then I can make some decisions based on the type. And this becomes really important when we start getting to things like error checking inputs, if we're pulling information from a file, deciding what to do with it based on type. I can't encourage this enough, but play around, make this your own, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.